Megan, you are our next generation's pastor, which means you work with the high school and you work with young adults and stuff. And there's some events coming up that we want to make sure Rancho Murrieta folk know about. So what's going on with some of the youth events and different things you have happening?
I'm so excited. So obviously, like our traditional youth groups and stuff, we haven't really been able to do that. So we're going to start planning once a month, kind of safe outing and events. So we want to invite Murrieta. All kids at all high schools are invited. We're gonna have on Tuesday, January 26th at 6:30 at the East Softball Field at Rancho Community Church in Temecula. We're gonna play kickball, we're gonna have pizza. Pizza's free. Just come on out, bring your friends, and just get out of the house and come play if you have a high schooler. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Awesome. Okay, then you also have a young adults event coming up, I believe, also as well.
Yes, we're starting a young adult service.
Okay.
And so our first one is gonna kick off on Sunday, January 24th. And it's right around the corner. And also, after the service, we're going to kind of have some games and connect.
Is that in the evening time? What time's the service at?
It's from 5 to 7.
Okay, so 5
starts
awesome.
at 5 right here outside at Rancho Temecula. So you can bring your friends and your masks.
Okay, yeah. And so everything will be down there below. You can see all the information on that.
I know, I'm excited.
And then we have our My City Youth event coming up. And it is coming up February 11th from 2 to 5. We are collecting, I don't want to get this wrong, toothbrushes, toothpaste, gum, and lip balm. And they're going to be putting packages together for these families in Hemet. We love My City Youth and what they're doing. I know you're a big part of that. So come on out to Rancho Murrieta at 10 a.m. on Sundays. We're still meeting outside at Mesa High School. Bring these items. Try to have them there before February 11th, so it needs to be that Sunday before. We'll collect them all the way up to then. And it'd be great to just have you participate with us. Also, we want to thank everyone that has just been so generous to our ministry. If you want to give towards Rancho Murrieta, go to rancho.tv/giving. Make sure you drop down to the Murrieta campus, and we would love for you to partner us in that way.
Yes.
So, yeah, we're still meeting outside every Sunday, 10 a.m. Awesome. It's a lot of fun. Come on out and join us. And maybe we'll see you this week if you're hearing this early, or next week. And that's what's going on at Rancho. Hey everyone, welcome to Rancho Murrieta Online. Steve Solomon here. I'm the teaching pastor. And if it's your first time joining us, we just want to say welcome. We are continuing today our new series that we just started last week called The Comeback. And, over the past year, I'd say one of the main setbacks that I've seen is in families. And the way that families have been impacted by a multitude of things. The global pandemic, without a doubt, as well as the volatile political climate that we find ourselves in. So many things are affecting the family in our current culture. Whether it be maybe the inability to be with your family because of COVID, or maybe you're finding yourself with your family too much because of COVID. Both of those are really having an impact in the world around us. Or maybe you have found it's even because of the differing views of your family members. I have known families that are really struggling because of differing political views in this climate. So there's a, havoc being just flowing through families right now in our culture. If you remember last week, if you didn't see it, we talked about Genesis 1 through 11. We saw how powerful sin was in the lives and the hearts of humankind. And when sin entered the world, we saw the devastation it had on what? On relationships. On relationships. Adam and Eve in experiencing shame before each other. And then their kids. Taking that shame to the point of even a deeper reality of jealousy and longing for the other person to the point where Cain actually kills his brother Abel. So I think we just need to come to the realization that family relationships are often the first to experience setbacks when life becomes difficult. It hits the home. And that's what we've been dealing with. And that's what we're looking at. And not only are they often first to experience setbacks, but those setbacks can be some of the most damaging ones, can't they? They're the ones that can just rip the very soul out of us. I mean, when life within the family structure is not going well, it affects everything. It affects what's going on at work, what's going on at school, what's going on in your friends. But with that said, one of the things that I have seen during this past years is also families thriving. I've actually seen family relationships shift during this time as well. And it comes down to things like spending more time together, not being as distracted by the busyness of life, realizing that putting a little effort in can go a long way. So a lot of these families that I'm walking with that are beginning to thrive, it's kind of because they've been forced in a sense to change. So even though there's been huge setbacks, there's also been many families that because of those changes in our culture, they're seeing a difference in their family. And again, as I mentioned, it's kind of this forced change of focus that's making a difference. Just last week, I have a Friday morning men's group that meets. We meet on Zoom. You can come join us. It's all online. It's on Friday mornings at 7 a.m. One of the guys in that group said he's concerned that if life goes back to normal, that he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to go back to how it was. Because right now, he's finding so much focus on his wife and their relationship. And he knows that before this all happened, man, they were at times felt like two ships passing in the night, right? So he's working towards, okay, when he has to go back, she's got to go back. How are they going to keep this going? So many of us, maybe you listening to me today, maybe one of your greatest 2021 comeback desires is for your family relationships. It's for you to focus a little bit more there. Maybe that's where you feel like you've experienced some of the greatest setbacks in 2020. Maybe it's just exposed problems that you were hiding, and those problems have now been exposed. So here's my question for today. Is it time to direct your attitude and action towards a comeback story in your family? Is it time? Is it time to think about that? For some, that might look like trying to get back to what you used to look like long time ago. Oftentimes when I meet with people, tell me a time when your family was thriving. And oftentimes they can remember those times and they can have a vision of what it could look like. But maybe for some of you, it's about getting your relationship and your family to a place it's never been. Oftentimes I meet with people that don't have that. It's been from their dating time through their first year of marriage to now 15 years later. It's always been a struggle. So wherever you might find yourself, is it time right now for your focus on a comeback story to be with your family? Well, one of the first dynamics family stories we see in the Bible early on is a story that there's a breakdown in the family. There's a breakdown in the family. It's a story that's found in Genesis, and it's a very famous story, okay? I mean, maybe throw out some ideas about this story, see if you can figure out which one it is. There's countless movies that have been made about this story. From Ben Affleck actually voicing the main character in an animated version, to, of course, VeggieTales. And VeggieTales covers it in a Western-type theme, only like they can do. And you can't forget the ever so popular musical comedy about this story, where the music was made by Andrew Lloyd Webber. Have you guessed the story yet? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's the story of Joseph and his brothers found in the book of Genesis. The multicolored dream coat, right, of Joseph. And it's a comeback story of epic proportions, because within the story, there is setback after setback after setback in this young man's life and in this family's life. Let me just give you an overview, because in the biblical narrative of the story, it's really about rescue and salvation. It's a story of a young man, Joseph, that is sold into slavery from his brothers. He was the youngest of these brothers, and they didn't like him, and so they sell him into slavery. From that point, he goes just on one adventure after another. He thrives where he first lands in this time of slavery with Potiphar, and he becomes the head over Potiphar's whole home. And then from that point on, just a few years later, he ends up being deceived by Potiphar's wife, ends up in jail for a few years, and in jail he thrives. And he becomes someone that oversees all the prisoners. From that point on, he sits in jail for quite a while to where he finally comes out, and in Egypt, he ultimately becomes the head over all of Egypt. where his brothers come during a famine to seek food, to seek help, not knowing that their brother is now the head over all of Egypt. And that's where the reconciliation takes place. That brings the children of Israel to Egypt, where if you know how that ends up, years later they become slaves of Egypt. 400 years of slavery, where it finally comes to the Exodus, one of the key stories of salvation in the Old Testament. I mean, this is a centerpiece story of God working in his saving hand to the children of Israel, representing ultimately the salvation that comes through freedom in Christ. But this story of Joseph and his brothers, which is found, I want to start kind of at the end. I want to start at the end of Genesis. It starts in chapter 35. It ends in chapter 50. Because I want us to understand something. I want us to think about something. That within this biblical narrative, when we talk about the salvation and all the things that's going on here, in the middle of this biblical narrative are real life experiences, right? There's a family struggling. There's a breakdown within that family. And then there's a reconciliation of that family. This is a story about a family. I mean, we get to look at it from 30,000 feet in the whole biblical narrative. But when you're just talking about the story as they see it, it's probably very different. And when looking at that story, we often can see God doing this or that through Joseph's life. And I love that. But there's something else we can see. And that's what I want us to think about when we're thinking about our own family comeback stories. And it's this, that people's attitudes and actions play a role in creating setbacks and turning them into comebacks, especially within the family. I want you to pay attention to this. That what you see is you see attitude, you see actions in Joseph, in his brothers. You see decisions being made. Some of those decisions created these setbacks, and then other decisions created these comebacks. And so I want us to start at the end of the story, because at the end of the story, Joseph makes a famous statement. It's a statement that has become a foundation of certain Christian doctrines that focus on God being in control. You see, for years, while Joseph was going through all the craziness of his experiences in Egypt, as he was going from slavery to imprisonment, to his brothers having to wrestle with everything that they did. They didn't know what was going on in Joseph's life. They didn't know what was happening. So when coming to Egypt during this great famine to help, and realizing that their brother had sold them into slavery and was in charge of everything, they were afraid. They were afraid. They didn't know what happened to their brother. They just knew that throughout all these years, they knew what they did to him. So they don't know the story that's happened. All they know is now they come and they realize that their brother's alive and he rules and he reigns. And they're afraid. They're afraid that maybe he might want to repay them for what they did to him. But Joseph saw it in a different light. And this is the verse in Genesis chapter 50. He says to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he assured them and spoke kindly to them. There's been so much discussion about this passage. For hundreds of years, there's been discussions about this passage. How does all this work out? And as someone, I'm talking about me, as someone who believes that God is here with us, that he is working in and through our lives, I've wrestled with kind of three possible kind of scenarios of how we could take this passage. And here's my three. Is God sovereignly making all these events happen that we see in this story? Is he allowing them to happen? Those are two different ways of looking at it. Or is he watching as they unfold and working in the lives along the way? the lives of those that are part of this story? So those three questions I've asked myself, and I believe they're all passages. There's passages throughout the Bible that can back up any one of these three scenarios in a way to take what Joseph said. And you know what? Maybe they're all working together at the same time, or in different times in different ways. I'm okay with that. But when I look at this story of Joseph and his family, there's one thing I do think we can clearly see. That I believe that Joseph and his brothers, that is, their attitudes and their actions played a role in all that happened from the beginning to the end. And that is something that not only do we have to wrestle with, right? We have to wrestle with our involvement in our setbacks. But we also need to believe in that for our comebacks. That we have options and choices that we make that bring forth these comebacks. And I think that's what we're seeing. So maybe God doesn't directly accomplish the comebacks, right? But the Holy Spirit empowers us to. And I think that's important. Because if in our family life, if this 2020 there's been major setbacks, then you need to understand that you have something to do with that and something to do with the comeback. I think it's an important reality to deal with. Because so many just wait, right? They're waiting for God to do something. And then they're wondering why he isn't, and they get discouraged along the way. And what I love about this story is that Joseph didn't wait around. He didn't wait around. I mean, he's the one that got jacked, right? He got first thrown into a hole. They're going to kill him. They're going to leave him there afraid he's going to die. So they sell him into slavery, and he just has one issue after another take place. But what does he do? His attitude and his actions, I believe, is what got them to finally, in Genesis 50, for him to be able to say what he said. I mean, listen to the impact that Joseph made wherever he was. His first place was in Potiphar's house. That's where he became a slave. And look what Potiphar says about him. It says, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his whole household and entrusted to his care everything he owned. This is a slave boy, right? This is the kind of young man that Joseph was. He didn't just sit there and wallow and wonder. He went into action. He had a certain kind of attitude. And if you know the story, Potiphar's wife takes a liking to him, tries to seduce this young man, Joseph, who said he was very handsome and a great worker. Joseph refuses. So instead, she says he tried to go after her, and that ends him up in prison. So now he goes from having this, okay, good thing, overseeing everything, to being in prison. What happens in prison? The same thing. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him a favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So then the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. And he was made responsible for all that was done there. Check this guy, man. Now he's in charge of everyone that's in prison. And the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care. He could just let it go. He was trustworthy. He was honest. He took care of business because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. He ends up in prison for a few years. He understands some dreams. Someone says, we're going to tell when we get out about this dream. They forget about him. It says he's in there for 2 more years till he finally comes out. He tells a dream that Pharaoh has and tells him his dream. Talks about a famine that's going to come. And Pharaoh just learns to trust him right away. And at the age of 30 years old, he becomes the overseer and in charge of all of Egypt. This is an incredible young man. So when it comes time and his brothers come to Egypt to find food and help for their family, Joseph had already spent years with a certain attitude. Years of making a certain kind of decision that got him to that point. And I think it was a struggle for him. The story, you got to read it. You can read, Joseph's struggle with his brothers. He messes with them. He gets them. They don't know it's him. I'm sure, and I can only imagine there were moments where revenge might have sounded really good, especially with what they did to him. But that wasn't the type of person that he was. And it resulted in an incredible comeback story with his family, from a broken family to reconciliation. So if your family is where your focus is for this comeback story in 2021, that's where you're at. I want us to consider just two realities that I believe can truly help. Realities that I saw as I read over and over this story of Joseph and his brothers. And it's this, that we have to see our part in the setback, and I believe in our part for the comeback. We got to see that. We got to understand that if there's a setback, that we all had something to do with that, right? Even if we want to blame everything else around us, how we react to what goes on around us, that's on me, that's on you. You see, when Joseph ticked off his brothers, he did seem to have a little pride. He was the youngest, and he had this pride in his position. He was his father's favorite, and he made sure that they knew about that. He heard from God that I'm going to rule over you, and I'm going to make sure I tell my brothers that. And that didn't sit well with them. Joseph did play a role in them turning on him. And I do believe, maybe it was a small role, and what happened to him, it's not what he deserved in any way, but it was a role. And their jealousy took over and enraged them against him, not justifying what they did, but you know what, in that day and age, with how important it was for your generations and the older son and the younger sons and how that worked, I definitely think we can understand their struggle. You see, pride and jealousy can create setbacks within our family, and it can keep us from moving beyond them. And that's what we see. We see pride in Joseph. We see jealousy in his brothers. We see some pride in his brothers. I know maybe some of you are saying, yeah, but you don't understand my situation. You're right. Maybe I don't understand your situation. I know I don't know your situation. But I have found when I consider the relationships that are struggling in my own life, especially within my family, I seem to always be able to find some pride or some jealousy in my own heart that I have brought to the table. I deserve better. Why did they get to do that and I didn't get to do that? Why do they get their way all the time? Or how dare you challenge me in this way? Whatever it might be that causes this tension, that has caused the setback, I want to sit there and think about what pride and what maybe jealousy is in my heart that's a root of it, at least for me. And even when I determine that maybe I only play a 5 or 10% role in the problem, I really do try to believe that I still have a say in the solution. I still have a say in the solution. Because here's the second part, is that humility and forgiveness can empower a comeback in your family. Read the story of Joseph. Go to Genesis 37 and read all the way to 50 this week. And in that, you will see jealousy and pride, and you will see humility and forgiveness. When his brothers come to Egypt, they are so humbled. They even know, they don't want to talk about what they did to their brother. They seem to know the weight of what they did. And there's a humility. And Joseph shows them forgiveness. He also shows some humility. He understands. And these two traits are all over the story. And these are two traits that I believe can take any family that could move from potentially like this setback to a comeback. In Colossians chapter 3, it says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." When you focus on these things, these are the heart, this is the attitude that can begin to help you make some different decisions, begin to help you see what you bring to the table. Bear with each other. Forgive whatever grievance you may have with one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Remember, all these stories in the Old Testament are these examples of Jesus. They're kind of these everything's talking about the ultimate forgiveness, the ultimate salvation, the ultimate life. The ultimate humility put on display, the forgiveness put on display. The one who could have been proud, but emptied himself of that and gave himself and showed forgiveness and love to those around us. He goes on, bear with each other. Forgive whatever grievance you may have against. Forgive as the Lord forgave, and above all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. I was thinking that Joseph probably had no idea of the comeback story that he was creating. He was just living life, right? He was just going from one thing to another with a focus and an attitude and actions that made such a difference. And I think that's pretty powerful. He had no idea. Maybe you don't have any idea. Like what could be your comeback from your setbacks? He wasn't making decisions based on maybe someday I'll be reconciled to my brother. He was just making the right decisions, doing the right things. I also know that there's no guarantees, right? There's no guarantees that even if I do recognize all my pride and all my jealousies, and I do focus on humility and forgiveness, there's no guarantee that my setbacks will become comebacks. There's nothing that guarantees that. But I can tell you this. I can tell you this in closing. If you just wallow in the situation you find yourself in, if you blame everyone else, and just do nothing, your comeback story probably will never happen. It'll probably never happen. But if you can seek God, and ask Him to help you be able to see your own pride and jealousies and maybe how you did have something to do and where that was in your circumstances, and you can ask for strength. You can ask for strength to show humility and forgiveness towards whoever in your family there's tension that you need to have a comeback story with. You just might experience that comeback story. A comeback story that you never could have imagined. Like I'm sure Joseph never could have imagined what was going to happen. You can have that comeback story. A story that you never could have imagined, and begin to see that what others meant for harm towards you, God intended for good, just like Joseph did. I hope that your family might be one of your main focuses in 2021 for a comeback story. I don't care what setbacks you might have had. Know that you can make a difference moving forward because God is with us, empowering us and moving us. And I hope that might encourage you today. Hope you guys have a great day. Come back next week as we continue and look at Job next week. Oh man, what a story. Have a great day.